Welcome to Quick Charge. It's November 18th, 2024, and I'm your host, Joe Boris. Today's episode is sponsored by Blue Eddy, a leading provider of sustainable energy solutions specializing in portable power stations, solar generators, and energy storage systems. As a provider of dependable and portable energy solutions, Blue Eddy has become an industry leader with a presence in over 100 countries that's trusted by millions of customers worldwide. Its portfolio of clean, portable energy solutions continues to grow, offering customers viable options for all uses and budgets. These solutions offer dependable power with plenty of plugs to connect devices. And a portfolio includes the AC70, AC180, AC200L, and Blue Eddy's latest technology, the hands-free, all-in-one backpack power stations. Now through November 28th, save up to 52% on Blue Eddy products during its exclusive Black Friday presale event, and explore all the deals at blueeddypower.com. Be sure to use promo code BlueEddy5OFF for an additional 5% off all power stations, or click the link in the YouTube description and show notes. Now, of course, whenever we do these ads at the front of the show, that means this is an interview segment. And the reason that this one is so important is because the solar industry, especially in the last 2 weeks, has really been taking off. We've seen a massive 3 gigawatt Chinese solar program come up in the Gobi Desert. It's a solar farm that can power more than 2 million households. But much more than China, we're seeing big solar projects happen in America as well. We've got a 100 megawatt solar farm that just broke ground last week in Wisconsin. And just today, Penske Truck Leasing has kicked off a U.S. rooftop solar rollout, beginning with its headquarters here in Illinois. Now, this is critically important because you've got 2 major projects, and remember, this is only 2 of dozens of others that are breaking ground right as we're having a very dramatic and very controversial change in presidential administrations looming on the horizon. And a lot of people are concerned about what the new incoming Trump administration might mean not only for EVs, but also for solar power. But the good news is that fully 78% of Trump voters have backed Biden's clean energy incentives, or at least are backing rebates associated with clean power programs like solar, like wind, and like energy efficiency rebates. Quote, every American wants lower electricity prices and greater energy security. And that's precisely what federal clean energy policies are delivering. That's according to SAIA President and CEO Abigail Ross Hopper. Politicians may talk and bluster as the election approaches. Of course, this was written prior to the November 6th election. But the polling is clear, and a savvy lawmaker will not undermine the billions of dollars in clean energy investments that are flowing into states and districts. A strong belief in the benefits of solar and energy storage drives voter support, with 75% of respondents agreeing that solar benefits the U.S. economy, 71% affirming that pairing solar with storage grid enhances grid reliability, and 74% agreeing that more solar use will save American families money. More than half of the people surveyed are thinking about getting rooftop solar. And new data from the U.S. Treasury Department shows that in 2023, more than 750,000 U.S. households claimed residential rooftop solar credits, with nearly 50,000 claiming tax credits for home battery storage. States like Nevada and Arizona are seeing some of the highest rates of solar rooftop adoption, thanks to the IRA. But a lot of people, no matter how excited they might be about solar, are still going to have questions about whether or not solar is right for them, or how solar rooftop incentives work in the first place. To help answer some of those questions, we've got Emily Walker and Spencer Fields, 2 researchers from Energysage, who have recently released the 19th iteration of their Solar Industry Intel Marketplace Report. Emily, Spencer, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having us.
Now, Emily, you've been doing this for a really long time, obviously 19 editions of this Solar and Storage Marketplace Report. What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen from version 1 into version 19?
Wow, that's such a good question. I mean, there's been a lot of change. Honestly, when we first started it, it was a lot of just talking about data, like throwing out the data there. And now we've really gotten more into the analysis side of things. So we're really trying to point out more key takeaways, what this means for the industry, what this means for consumers. And yeah, it's been cool to really follow the industry. And now we're able to talk about and compare things more and see how things have changed.
Now, Spencer, one of the things that you get to immediately is the first round of analysis in this report. You look at the gross price per watt by half year, right? And it starts off in 2014, which I guess was the first iteration of this report. And you're nearly 375, 380 per watt. And then now in, H1 of 2024, you're closer to 250 than really any other time since COVID, right? Which is when everything kind of the bottom dropped out of everything. What is driving that downward pressure on pricing?
It's a really good point that solar pricing is coming back down, which is a plus because for a couple of years there between 2021 and really the end of 2024, we saw solar prices start to rise again on Energysage for the first time since we started tracking and reporting on solar prices. So in my mind, it's less about the ways in which something has materially changed to bring prices back down, so much as us reverting to the benchmark that we had achieved in 2021 as an industry. So the pricing that we've observed on Energysage in the first half of this year was 269 a watt, which is the median price. So that's across all of the quotes on the platform. That's across hundreds of thousands of quotes to consumers all across the US. We now operate in 50 states, which is awesome. This report covers data from 42, 43 states, something like that. The lowest prices that we ever recorded across the 6-month period were in 2021 when we hit 267 watts. We're right in that ballpark right now. And so again, for me, it's less about, oh, we've unlocked these new cost efficiencies in the residential solar sector, so much as we're reverting to the pricing. It's almost like a more accurate price discovery than we've had over the last couple of years when pricing increased as a result of supply chain shortages and labor shortages. And I think as inflation has hit every aspect of everybody's lives, just pricing for everything has gone up. And so as a result, solar pricing went up as well. Now we're starting to see those prices back to what we had achieved as an industry a couple years ago. And I think from here, we're going to see the prices go down moving forward. In terms of like generally, broadly, what's driving price declines for residential solar or solar as an industry, it's really two things. Number one is what are called the hard costs, which is about the hardware and the technology itself. So that's the solar panels, the inverters, the racking, the pieces of steel that hold the solar panels onto your roof or onto the ground for a big field of solar panels, the balance of system, copper, things like that. And then there are the soft costs, which are labor, overhead, margins, sales and marketing, permitting and interconnection, things like that. Hard costs, the cost of the technology itself has come down precipitously over the last decade, 2 decades. If you look at the price of solar reported early in the 2000s in the aughts, it was like $10 a watt, $15 a watt for residential solar. Most of that decline was in the cost of, silicon, in the cost of solar panels, in the cost of inverters, everything, just what you would imagine cost efficiencies, economies of scale to drive from a hardware, cost reduction perspective. Where there's still room to reduce costs in residential solar in the US is on the soft cost side of things. So that's sales and marketing primarily. It costs more to find consumers and solar shoppers in the US than pretty much anywhere else in the world, which is something that we're trying to work through at Energysage. The cost of labor is really high, margins are pretty high. And in particular, it's very costly and time consuming to permit and interconnect solar. And so there are various initiatives and companies and programs that are trying to reduce the time and the cost to interconnect your system to actually get it turned on and operating. And so hopefully those things will drive the next round of cost reductions for residential solar.
Now, I really want to highlight something that you said there, that the cost of customer acquisition is especially high in the US. And I know that in recent years, not only because of a couple of highly publicized bankruptcies, but also a couple of highly publicized court cases where customers may have been caught into a lease agreement that they may not have fully understood. And now they're dealing with 20, 25-year plans on solar equipment. And that's put a bad taste in people's mouths. So let's talk a little bit about some of the ways that Energysage is different from some of these other solar companies, how people are generating quotes from you guys. If I go in and click on the link and give you guys my information, am I going to get 60 or 70 really high pressure phone calls? What are some of the key differentiators here?
Totally. So at Energysage, our mission is to help people make smarter energy decisions. And really, our core value is consumer protection. And so that influences every decision that we make as an organization. If you're unfamiliar with who we are at Energysage, for listeners or people who are watching this, we are the country's largest online marketplace for clean energy comparison shopping. And so what that means is we provide educational resources and tools to people who are interested in learning about their clean energy options. And then when they're ready to actually shop for those products, we have an online platform that allows people to do just that. We got our start in rooftop solar. Our marketplace went live in late 2012, early 2013 up here in Massachusetts, and then we've expanded into the rest of the country. We just made it into all 50 states earlier this year, which is a really cool milestone for the organization. But what happens is if you're shopping for solar through Energysage, you input your address, your physical address, your email address, which we then ask you to verify. And then we ask for some details about your electricity usage. What's a typical monthly electricity bill cost for you? If you can upload a recent electricity bill, that's even better. That'll help us hone in on the customization of that solar quote for your home. From there, we go out and get you custom quotes for your home for solar or solar plus storage, if that's something that you're interested in, from up to 7 contractors in your area that we've partnered with. We vet and screen all of our contractors. We have a reasonably high bar of entry. We don't just let anybody on board to quote on the platform. And what's really cool is if you put your information into a lot of different, effectively just lead generation forms for solar in the space, your number, your address, your email address get shared pretty broadly. And you end up being, like you mentioned, Joe, bombarded by phone calls, emails, spam from contractors in your area or even not in your area. On Energysage, you don't actually need to include a phone number to sign up. And all of the communication with the installers can happen through our platform. We allow you to email the contractors with effectively one of those Craigslist anonymized email addresses so that you only share your information with a contractor when you're ready to do so, when you're ready to take the next step. And move forward with a certain contractor or have them out for a site visit to really refine the quote that they've submitted online.
And I really want to highlight here, it's not just solar, right? It's solar plus
Correct.
energy storage, solar plus battery backup, and it's essentially creating an entire package. And when you look at, the storms that we've seen, not only in, throughout Appalachia this summer and Florida as well, but we've seen millions of people without power, right? So I think this is something that is becoming a greater part of the national consciousness. And this is something that I think a lot more people are going to be interested in. But it does kind of raise the question when you look at these extreme weather events, how well do these panels, how well does this equipment hold up to that? And if something does happen, an 80-foot pine tree comes down on the roof, who owns that? Is that something that your insurance covers? So it's really like a 17-part question, a lot to unpack there. I apologize, but you guys are professionals. You can handle it.
Yeah, I'd love to take part of that question. I actually was talking to a solar installer in North Carolina just 2 days ago, asking him these exact questions. So he mentioned that following, Hurricane Helene, which just hit, there are some places that still don't have power, at least as of, us talking, they didn't have power. But he's hearing a lot of really great success stories for people who did have solar plus storage. And like you mentioned, it's definitely top of mind for people like, some of these panels aren't technically rated to hurricane grade winds, or they are, but like now hurricanes are becoming so powerful that they're even beyond what the rating is.
Right. You need like a tornado rating now.
Yeah. And to be fair, if a tornado is going to come through and rip off your roof, it's going to rip off your solar panels. But short of that happening, your solar panels are going to stay on the roof. They're bolted down really well. If you have a great installer, you can feel confident that they're secured to your roof and you don't need to worry about that. Obviously, there is a risk of debris hitting your roof. It happens sometimes in hurricanes. Ideally, it's only going to take down a couple of solar panels and not your entire system. So if you have that battery backup, you're still going to have some power to continue to recharge your battery over days. And this installer mentioned to me, typically following a hurricane, you have beautiful weather. So you can, lose power and then be without it for days on end where they're trying to fix the grid, or maybe your solar panels can't power your battery during the hurricane itself, but then following the hurricane, you can get your power back on really quickly. And ideally, like if your battery is sized enough to power your home throughout that outage, even when the weather is bad, maybe you never lose power. One of the things that we included in our marketplace report this year was a survey that we ran over the summer specifically on resiliency. And we included responses from about 70 people spanning 17 different states, just asking about what their experience is like now that they have a battery. And one of the most impressive stats that came out of it was 90% of respondents said they've never lost power during an outage since getting a battery. So I think it really speaks to, the type of resilience that these systems do provide.
100%. And I love that page. That's page 18 of the survey. We'll have a link to it in the show notes here. What I really liked about this was looking at the types of devices that people powered with their battery.
Yeah.
Number one response, obviously refrigerator. Number two, Wi-Fi, kind of not the best, I would say, not the best mirror into what society values. But the ones that I found really interesting were the sump pump, with 15% of respondents saying that they powered their sump pump with their battery. I think that's a great call because obviously you're dealing with flooding. You want to get that stuff out of your basement, out of your home as quickly as possible. Medical devices, I'm lucky enough that I don't have to deal with that, but I know that that can literally be a life-saving event if you do have power there. But 7% EV charger, and I really wanted to focus on this because electric vehicles plus solar panels effectively means that you're making your own fuel for the vehicle, right? The sun is shining in, you're powering the inverter, and it's charging the car. Because, when I was in Hurricane Andrew and Hurricane Katrina in the 90s and in the early aughts, and my family currently in North Carolina dealing with the after effects of Helene, the number one thing people like to point to who are EV critics is, what are you going to do when the power goes out? But the problem with that is power is also out at the gas station, and those gas pumps all run on electricity. Gasoline doesn't just magically pour forth from these things, right? They need electrical power to pump the gas. And when there's no power, there's no access to gasoline. But with a solar panel, even if it's not a DC fast charge, even if it's a long trickle charge for 2 or 3 days, you can fill up your EV and get 200 or 300 miles of range. I was kind of shocked that it was only 7%. Do you have a sense of why that might be, or is it just something where 7% kind of mirrors the overall market adoption of EVs, and this is a pretty representative slice of Americana, right?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point and a really interesting question. I think that there are sort of two parts to it. The first one is exactly what you finished the question with, Joe, which is what is the market adoption rate of EVs? I think in Q3 I saw Kelly Blue Book said 9% of cars sold were EVs. So that's, I think we're growing, and we just hit 9% of cars sold as EVs. So yeah, maybe only 7% of folks actually have EVs. I think it's probably a higher percentage of solar adopters also have EVs. Each of these products ends up sort of begetting more electrification purchases, right? It's like you get a smart thermostat, you see how much you can save, and then you say, how else can I save on my energy? Or you get solar panels and you say, wait, why am I still paying for gas? Why don't I just fill my car with the sun? Like that's what my wife and I did, and it's fantastic, right? So I think the adoption rate might be higher. The other piece of it is, like, from my perspective, it doesn't make a ton of sense to use a 10 kilowatt hour battery or a 13 kilowatt hour battery to try to charge an 80 kilowatt hour or 100 kilowatt hour car. And so I think people might be thinking about it from that perspective, but there's a really important point, which is that if you have a battery comes with a grid forming device, which makes it so that your solar panels and the inverters on your solar panels think that the grid is up and running. If your inverters don't think that the grid exists at a certain moment, they'll shut off. Basically, the idea is they don't want to accidentally put electricity onto lines, onto poles and wires, transmission lines, distribution lines in your neighborhood that line workers are actively working on, because they don't want to accidentally turn those dead wires into live wires, which becomes a safety risk for line workers, for the people who are trying to restore power in your neighborhood. So if your inverter can't detect the grid, it's searching for the 60 hertz frequency of the grid every second. If it can't detect it, it shuts down the solar panels. But with a battery will again come with a grid forming device in almost all scenarios. And that then basically tricks the inverters into thinking that the grid is up and running, which then allows them to continue to produce solar. So even if you're not directly powering, like charging your EV's battery from your stationary battery and your, on the side of your house or in your garage or in your basement, having a battery allows you to continue to power your EV from solar, where if you didn't have a battery and you didn't have a grid forming device in your home, your solar panels might actually not produce electricity for your home or your car until the full grid comes back and they see that frequency that the grid is up and running. So I think part of it is that like maybe there's an opening or an opportunity for consumer education to say, hey, look, having a battery doesn't mean that you're going to take all of the energy that you've stored that you're hoping to use for your home and then put it into your car, but rather it allows you to continue to charge your car in a way that just having solar may not.
I think a lot of people, especially solar adopters and people who are familiar with battery energy storage systems and things like that, they might be looking at this in an inverse way where they're not looking at it in the way of using the solar to fuel their car. They're looking at the car's battery as the backup source to power the home.
Also true. Emily can talk more about this. We're starting to see more about bidirectional charging. But yeah, I mean, you can think about, like I was just saying, like a car battery is probably an order of magnitude larger than a stationary battery from a, amount of energy stored perspective.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that bidirectional charging is still definitely in its infancy. There's a lot of room for growth, and we're not seeing huge adoption of it. There's not very many options out there available for people. So yeah, it hasn't really come to market the way I guess people expected it to, or as quickly. We like to say every time we go to RE Plus, which is one of the biggest or the biggest clean energy conference, at least in North America, they almost always, all the booths are showcasing bidirectional chargers, and you ask them, when is this going to be available? And they're all like, later this year. And they've been saying that.
It's been later this year since
Yeah,
2019. No,
exactly.
for sure.
And I mean, like when was the Super Bowl commercial with the Ford Lightning
Yeah.
showing people powering their home in a backup
Oh yeah,
or in an outage,
2021, something
right?
like that. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. Like how many homes actually have that at the moment, right? Like if you just have a typical level 2 EV charger, that doesn't work. You need a very specific charger that costs, $10,000 instead of $1,500.
Right.
And the installation is more complex and as a result costlier. So there is, I think, this misconception that right now I can take my car and my electric vehicle and power my home. That's for the most part not true.
Right.
Some cars like the Hyundai Ionic, what is it, the Ionic 6, maybe there are other ones as well, have vehicle to load. And the F-150 Lightning has that as well, where it's like you can run small loads off of your car. And so that's a way that you could
Right.
find a way to like run an extension cord from your car to your refrigerator or to your Wi-Fi router so that you have some level of backup power. But in terms of just like, I'm going to go, park my car in my garage, plug it into the charger, and then I can run my home off of my car. That, to Emily's point, is still very nascent technology and not something that we've seen significant adoption of yet.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I did learn this week that there's a battery that exists from Franklin that you can plug your EV directly into the battery. It recognizes it as a generator. So then you can use your car's battery to continue to refuel your home battery in case your solar panels, like in case you do have bad weather and you can't continue to charge your battery with solar panels. So it does provide kind of that extra level of capacity for your battery storage.
So this is a great segue into the next thing I was going to say is that, Emily, this is Emily Walker, by the way. Your official title is senior researcher for solar and storage, which effectively means that you are constantly in the market finding the newest thing. So somebody who's approaching you guys, they're not looking at some warehouse that has a stack of new old stock of 5-year-old batteries and, NLX chargers that no longer connect to the internet and all kinds of other horrific stuff. You're out there finding the latest and greatest stuff so that when someone does reach out to you guys through the Energysage platform, they are getting kind of the most future-proof product available. It's not something that's going to be completely out of date in a year or two.
100%. Yeah. And honestly, one thing Spencer and I have been working on pretty tirelessly now for a while is update. So Energysage is great because like Spencer was saying earlier, it allows you to compare these quotes apples to apples really easy. And part of that is the equipment itself. So we have a rating system currently that allows you to see how that equipment performs in relation to other equipment that you're being quoted. Equipment's changed a lot in the last few years, and specifically we're talking about solar panels, batteries, and inverters. It's changed a lot, and so Spencer and I have been working on our next iteration of this equipment rating system, which will launch sometime soon. We don't have an exact date yet, but
within the next year, right? As soon as
yeah,
the V2G charger comes out.
But this time we actually mean it. It will be within the next year.
Guys, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. I know we're coming to the end of our time commitment here. One last question before we get into the how do people find you and follow you stuff. We talked a little bit about, this was not the word you guys used, but we talked a little bit about how solar adoption, EV adoption drives other electrification choices. And throughout this study, you talk about some of those choices, whether it's an induction cooktop or a heat pump water heater. Are those things that you guys are tracking because eventually we're going to be able to get those quotes through Energysage? Or is this something that you think your customers are just going to be interested in and they want to be made aware of the trends in those markets?
Yeah, it's kind of both, right? Part of it is we want to be a one-stop shop, not just for consumer education around these things, but also a place where consumers can shop, not just for solar plus storage, but for all of their home electrification needs. I mean, when you look at the industries, you look at forecasts from Rocky Mountain Institute say that just to hit state level policies and targets, we're going to see 19 million heat pumps installed by 2030. That means somewhere between 2 and 3 million a year for the rest of this decade. Mm-hmm. On solar, we're at 5 million residential homes with solar. By 2030, we're going to be at 10 million. When you look at EV chargers, we're probably going to have 10 million EV chargers installed in homes by 2030 as well. That means somewhere between hundreds of thousands and millions per year that are getting installed. And you can just kind of go down the line on all of these different electrification products. Storage, we're seeing a 30% adoption rate or attachment rate of storage to solar projects, both within Energysage's marketplace and outside Energysage's marketplace and in the solar market as a whole in the country. So these, we're at the elbow in the hockey stick right now in terms of adoption curves for all of these different products. And we want to be a part of that clean energy transition and help these people make smarter energy decisions for their homes.
100%. And we over here at Electric obviously want to support you guys doing that. That's what we're all about. So for everybody listening in or watching this on YouTube, obviously energysage.com. Spencer, Emily, what's the best way for people to follow along and find out more about what Energysage is doing?
Head to energysage.com. We have, like Spencer mentioned, tons of great content to research, learn about solar and different clean energy products. And then if you're ready to shop for them as well, we can provide free custom quotes.
All right, Emily, Spencer, thank you so much for being on the show. Once again, if you want to find out more about Energysage and all of the work that they're doing, click on the link in the show notes. We'll also have that link in the YouTube description just below our Bluetti sponsored links as well. So definitely take a look at that. And as always, we definitely want to hear about the kind of people you want to see interviewed on this show. If there's somebody from the world of EVs, the world of e-bikes, e-mobility, micromobility, transportation, battery technology, solar, or energy efficiency in general that you'd like to hear from, let us know in the comments. Shoot us an email to tips@electric.co. We'll do everything we can to get them on the show. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss that.